afternoon, good morning, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening to this, but I'm so excited. Today's a beautiful day. The weather is a bit chilly, but it's okay. You know, you're gonna get those clothes out that you don't wear often just because of the weather. I'm excited here. I'm with this man, this wonderful man. He's the author of Relationship Extracts, and he is a very special friend of mine. So today we wanted to talk about something that I felt like you should be here to talk about it with me. And yes, we are still having conversations with future you, but today we want to talk about something that I think we need to, really talk about. And that's to do with the rising of divorce cases. I think there was a mail, one of the post mails that came out should be a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and they had written how the divorce cases, what number was that?
About 22,000.
22,000 divorce cases. And for me, that was very alarming and very concerning, because I started to ask myself, like, how is that even possible? So I wanted to have somebody here that has actually talked about relationships in his book Relationship Extracts, and I felt like maybe we should talk about this together. So what do you think? What are some of the reasons that you think are the main issues that are causing divorce cases to rise?
Thank you very much in the first place for having me in this space.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm glad to be back again.
Thank you.
So perhaps when we talk about relationships, especially when you read my book, I actually say that relationships are the most vital part of every human being.
Exactly.
And for God, on God's perspective, that's his highest desire. So that means relationship provides us a core of every human aspect.
Exactly.
Everyone is supposed to be related in a way or two. Now, one of the most important relationships everybody's going to face or would want to face or is going to experience in a way or two is a marriage.
Exactly.
Okay, so a marriage apparently is something that is very important. I'm not married yet, but obviously we have been seeing marriages around. I grew up in a family of dad and mom. They were married. They are married.
Yeah.
Okay, so to see the cases rising in terms of divorce is quite alarming,
Right?
and very saddening to that effect. And I think once you see numbers or statistics like that, it should actually trigger something in you, and you begin to actually think about it, like, what is happening? So 22,000 cases in a year is not a joke. It is something that we are definitely supposed to really think about.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you look at the outline of my book, I actually say that the most important relationship you actually have to have is the spiritual relationship, which is between you and God, because that will begin to help you have a better understanding of every other kind of relationship.
It's good that you've actually said that, but then what was alarming about the statistics is that if you get to look at the numbers, you'll find that the church is part of that number. Like, there are a number of divorce cases in the church. So what does that bring out? Because you find, of course, we expect that if somebody is in the church, they somehow kind of have a relationship with God. So if they have that relationship with God that you're saying is the stepping stone of all the other relationships, how is it then that the very church is then having a number of divorce cases? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so basically for the background of that particular chapter, especially when we talk about the spiritual relationship, and the introduction to my book talks about the first failed relationship, which is between God and man, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So at that point, that relationship was disfigured, and every relationship that comes afterwards had got effects that are drawn from that relationship that went down. So now when we're trying to look at those particular statistics, and for the fact that mostly the church is part of the number, I actually did another research. You find that mostly the number might be higher on the side of the church.
Wow.
Okay, and the reason, I believe the reason is because, yes, I've said the spiritual relationship is important, but the reason I think is that within the confines of the church, we are not handling the aspect of marriage very well.
Okay.
And I think it's a very important issue that we're supposed to do. And it's basically the interpretation sometimes of some scriptures, because I've been seeing most of the situations, when you look at the reasons they gave with those statistics, is that part of it was submission of the wife to the husband.
So it's like the wife is not able to submit she's in the church, she's,
Exactly.
you know, she's got this relationship with God,
Mhm.
but then just the submission part
Mhm.
is where the issue is, and the man just throws in the towel. Like, if this woman is not going to submit, scripture says she should submit,
Yeah.
so then this thing is done. Okay, that's
And because the fact that marriage is very important, and that it is within the confines of this spiritual Christendom, kind of,
yeah,
most people wouldn't want to divorce,
Yeah.
but they would want to divorce based on a reason.
okay,
Whenever they want to divorce, they want to divorce based on a reason. If something gives a person a reason to divorce, then they are going to take it.
okay.
So when you look at the Christian setup, they give you very little chances of getting those reasons to divorce.
Yeah.
But when you look at a husband, for instance, who's trying to say, my wife doesn't submit, he's trying to create a reason. Like, because a wife, according to the Bible, says you are supposed to submit.
So if
And
she's
when
not
she
submit,
doesn't do that,
just
then
do
it
it
becomes
by-
a problem. So that is one of the reasons somebody will quickly say, okay, I'm a Christian, and this wife is supposed to act Christian-like. And what is Christian-like according to them? It's submission. Now, that is just one of the reasons. So somebody can pull that up and say, I want to file for divorce. So those are some of the causes of divorce in the Christian.
So now, if this is me and I'm having a conversation with future me, what should me know now about submission as a woman, especially, that I don't end up in that state? I don't add to those statistics, and next time it will be, you know, an extra one because I didn't have this conversation now. So what is it that I need to know now that's going to help me later with regards to this exact reason that you've given?
So practically for women growing up, and basically for us guys as well, it needs to spike a keen interest for us to get to understand. Like I said, I think most of the time it's misinterpretation of that particular scriptures
Yeah.
that talk about those areas. I know there are a lot of things that
Yeah.
are supposed to be done. Men of God are actually doing a lot of work to really teach about those things. But I think the fact that the stats are there, they do not lie. That means we are supposed to do some work in there. So as a young person growing up, as you think about your marriage in future, think about what you want for yourself first, and begin to invest in terms of trying to find out. For instance, in different marriages, how is it? How is the submission, for instance, if we're going to talk about submission? What is expected of me as a woman, and what is expected of a husband, okay, towards a woman? So when you begin to invest, don't just go in a marriage without having understood those things, because it is when you have been thinking you've been independent all along, and then you come and meet those things when they are teaching you on those marriage lessons, then you kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna go through this state, and then once I go through, because it's just a lesson,
Just
it won't
one
last
lesson. And it's
a
only for
lifetime.
6 months, yeah?
Exactly.
Some
It might
even
be
been
6
3
months,
months
1
and
month, or what,
yeah.
yes. So depending on the lessons that happens, you'd want to just jump in afterwards. But I think you need to begin to teach yourself those things, to learn, discover, and understand. We all need to do, guys and girls, we all need to understand this aspect. We need to sit down and have somebody teach us about all these aspects.
So I think submission is one of those topics that I really feel like we need to really understand, because we misinterpret submission. Somebody will say that if I'm submitting to him, for example, it means that when he wakes up today and he says you're not going to work today, then I should stay and not go to work. Even if he doesn't give reasons, he doesn't help me understand why. He just says it's like a command, then I should do it. But I don't think that's submission, because I actually think that gives room for the family to even start having problems. It gives room for the marriage to start having problems, because if I'm not understanding the reason why he's bringing up certain things, a part of me will want to rebel, and that's just the way the human mind is. The human mind, especially when you give them confines, you say, don't do this. The part of me will say, why shouldn't I do it? I'm gonna do it to make him angry. And even when it says I shouldn't go, I'll go, because I did not understand the reason he was coming from. But submission requires that even when he's coming to me and he's telling me, see, today I don't want you to go to work, and the reason is because this is what's happening in the streets. They're killing people, and also the other reason is our child is sick. I want you to just take care of the child because the child can't remain alone. There are certain reasons, you know, even myself, after hearing the reason behind him saying something, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I really get why he's saying it. But then if the house is full of men that are just commanding, commanding, it doesn't leave so much room for somebody to easily submit, because they want to rebel against that. It's very difficult to just, do something that somebody tells you. But then the only way we are going to deal with this submission issue is when communication is positive, is when communication is there. Like it's working effectively, because there's communicating. There is don't go. Then there is don't go because this, that helps. And so even as we are working on our future selves, and as we are having these conversations with our futures, we need to work on this submission issue. You and your partner now, as you are getting ready for the next step, start to have some of these conversations. What does submission look like to your partner? What does submission look like in the background where you're coming from? Talk about these things so that your partner understands. In my partner's house, for example, maybe in his house, the way he saw the mom submitting to the dad is not the same as how I saw my mom submitting to my dad. So what I believe is submission might not be the same, and that's why we need to have some of these conversations early. But then you see that these days we are so, it's about Netflix and chills, it's about outings, it's about, movies, it's about going out to eat, but we are not sitting down and having conversations with our partners. And so we are ending up having some of the important conversations in marriage. And so when you find out something, then in marriage, then I realize that his definition of submission is not my definition, and I'm like, okay, so from the look of things, this can't work. So thanks, it was wonderful knowing you. And then people are leaving. That's what's causing that. So today, a conversation you need to have with yourself is, what does submission look like to me? How am I relating with my partner? Or if you don't have a partner yet, start to think about some of the things you are going to be ready to discuss with your partner at a very early stage, so that the partner has an idea of what your life would look like in the next few years. So I love you guys so much, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. We're still going to continue talking about these statistics. Today we've talked about submission. Next week we're going to be talking about money. I think money, it's one of the biggest issues in marriages that's causing that divorce. So join us next week on Sunday as we're going to be dealing with money. I love you guys. Have a blessed week.
Bye-bye.